All right, we're going to cover the glute layering model here, and this is going to be more geared towards how Athos can be used to monitor each layer within this model to ensure your athletes are functioning to the highest extent. Did two previous videos that were a little bit longer than what this is going to be, and those will demonstrate each of these layers, but ultimately this system is a systematic approach to glute function. We're trying to make sure that our athletes are functioning in hip extension in the appropriate pattern. It's going to consist of the 4 layers that we're going to go through. And ultimately, this is a lot of systems within a system. So how can we make all of these aspects work together and then utilize Athos? Because we know a lot of us coaches are seeing 30 plus, maybe into the 40 and 50 athletes at one time. So being able to both see live time EMG data while your athletes are wearing them, and also being able to go back and seeing how your athletes function throughout a training program or practice can be extremely beneficial. So we're going to kind of go through each of these layers here. So the first is the structural, and that's the idea that without being in structural alignment, your athletes are going to go into defense mode, and obviously that defense mode, your athletes can't attack or perform explosive movements in the most efficient manner possible. From there, we've got RPR, Reflexive Performance Reset. We're using this to ensure that the appropriate firing pattern is being used, so glute to hamstring to opposite QL. We'll use glute isometrics once these first 2 lower layers have been established to increase motor cortex firing. And then finally, 3D contralateral and other transfer of training pieces. Obviously, glute isometrics are great, but we need to be able to transfer that appropriate hip extension firing pattern throughout athletics and whatever movement that's required in competition. So again, those are that's a really brief review, but we go into a lot more depth in the other 2 YouTube videos. So spotting structural issues, how Athos can help. Obviously, it's going to create awareness. As you can see in this graph down here, we have our athlete with our solid lines and as for their glutes and the dashed lines for their hamstrings. And you can see on this day here that athlete's glutes drop off. And after checking some structural alignment, we noticed that he was off. We had him corrected, addressed that issue, and then you can see the following day pops right back up to where we want him to be, where we would say he's functioning at a high level. Again, this is going to be hard to pick up even with a coach's eye, so Athos can be extremely beneficial when these altered biomechanics due to structural issues occur. The Reflexive Performance Reset. So once they're structurally in alignment, you'll find that athletes a lot of times are cheating throughout their movements. So what we've done with Athos is it gives us a live view. So this would be a view on your phone, and then you can see that this athlete in the red is functioning incorrectly. They're utilizing their hamstrings before their glutes, versus in the green arrow, we've now addressed that, and those glutes are firing first prior to the hamstrings. So this is our optimal hip extension firing pattern. And what's great about Athos is you'll be able to actually see not only the intensity or the color, but also the rate of change, and then also the order of firing, so recruitment within those muscles. This is just an example of what we did. We did a vertical jump test. Athletes' left glute and right glute addressed using just RPR, and then you can see the jump a few minutes later is back to a much closer to optimal, or at least even for this athlete. So Athos can give us the live view to view these immediate changes, but also looking back on a movement specifically to understand the changes that our program has made, or whatever model you're implementing. The glute isometrics. So this is going to be an extended duration isometric, and Athos has been huge for us here to give the live view. So you can immediately see when an athlete is utilizing their glutes versus if they're starting to cheat and use maybe a low back or a hamstring more and more, then that's getting away from what we're trying to do with that motor cortex firing. So that real-time feedback has been huge. And then it's also shown us our trends over the long term. As we can see, this athlete in the blue is what we would consider to be a high functioning athlete. They consistently stay at that high glute level, versus this athlete in the red begins to drop off after time. Well, what we did at this point here on the 29th is we implemented 6 minutes of glute isos per day. And then you can see each day he sees about a 3% increase until he's back up to where he was before. So the long-term availability to see the trends in your athletes has been huge, but also the live time. Finally, the 3D contralateral transfer of training. Obviously, you want to make sure that this pattern is maintained, whether you're completing a contralateral, so hip extension in the sagittal plane, or if you're doing work in the frontal or transverse plane as well, making sure that this glute is functioning to a high level. And then all the way transfer of training, like in this example you have here, the pro agility, starting to see not only how much the glutes are utilized in each rep, but how that athlete progresses either from session to session or even rep to rep. So you can see as this athlete begins to fatigue, they start to decrease. Now they're not what I would consider to be anywhere close to a dangerous level, but they are starting to see that fatigue set in, and that is reducing their glute contribution. So these are all the available aspects that Athos gives us to use with the glute layering model.